Disney Fairies, a Rare Talent. Tinkerbell was the newest fairy in Pixie Hollow. She was a Tinker Fairy, but she didn't want to be. The Nature Fairies got to help change the seasons on the mainland. Tinkerbell wanted to go there too, but Queen Clarion, ruler of all the fairies, had told her that a Tinker's Fairy's work was in Pixie Hollow. Tinkerbell was crushed. Then she had an idea. She would switch her talent. "I've decided I'm not going to be a Tinker Fairy anymore," she told her friends as they waited for their daily dose of pixie dust the next morning. "If you could teach me your talents, maybe I could show the Queen I can work with nature too. Then she'd let me go to the mainland." "I've never heard of someone switching talents," said Iridessa, a light talent fairy. But Tink insisted. "All I'm asking is that you give me a chance," she said. Silvermist, a water talent fairy, offered to teach Tinkerbell how to place dewdrops on a spiderweb. Tinkerbell gave it a try. She scooped up a perfect dewdrop from the pond. Pop! Water went everywhere. "Shake it off," Silvermist said. "You can do this." Tinkerbell pulled another drop out of the pond. She flew over to the spider web and reached out to place the dewdrop. Pop! She tried and tried, but each time the droplet burst. Silvermist sighed. "You know, you always struck me as a light fairy kind of gal." That night, Iridessa showed Tinkerbell how to light fireflies. She used a leaf bucket to catch the last rays of sunlight. Then she tossed a handful of light into the air. The fireflies flew through the light and came out with their tails lit. But when Tinkerbell reached into the bucket, the light wouldn't stick to her finger. "Ah!" she yelled. "This is impossible!" She threw the bucket on the ground. Light shot out in every direction. Iridessa and Tink zigged and zagged, trying to avoid the rays. But once one of them hit Tink, her back began to glow, and the fireflies chased after her. The next day, Tinkerbell was working on a kettle when Fairy Mary flew over. "I know what you've been up to," she said, shaking her head, "and I had such high hopes for you." "You do well to listen to her," said Bauble, another Tinker Fairy. "Why, so I can do this my whole life?" Tink interrupted. "I don't want to be just a stupid tinker." As soon as the words were out of her mouth, Tinkerbell knew she shouldn't have said that to them. Her friends looked at her sadly. "I didn't mean... Guys, I have to go," she said, and flew off out of the workshop. Tinkerbell felt bad about what she'd said, but she had a new task to keep her busy. Fawn, an animal fairy, was showing her how to teach baby birds to fly. "Okay, open your wings and flap them up and down," Fawn told a baby bird as she flapped her arms. The baby bird did what Fawn did, and he started to rise into the air. Fawn asked Tink to help with the last little bird. Then she flew away. Tinkerbell looked at the baby bird. "Hey, little fella," she said, "you want to do some flap flap today?" She showed the bird how to flap his wings, but he wouldn't move. He looked scared. Tink sighed. "This is not going to work," she said. Just then she looked up and saw a bird soaring across the sky. "Hey, maybe that guy can help." She flew toward the bird. Suddenly a scout fairy cried, "Hawk!" The fairies flew for cover. Tinkerbell gasped as the big bird started to chase after her. She spotted a knothole in a nearby tree. and dove inside. "Hey," Vidya said as Tinkerbell crashed into her. "This is my hiding spot. Find your own place to hide." Crack! The hawk pushed his beak through the hole and snapped at the fairies. There was only one way out. The two fairies jumped into a hole and slid down a tunnel at the bottom. Tink slammed into Vidya and accidentally pushed her out of the tree. The hawk spotted Vidya and swooped closer. Suddenly, a berry hit the hawk. The fairies continued to throw berries and rocks until the bird flew off. Tinkerbell hurried over to help Vidya. She was covered in berry bits, but Vidya brushed her off. "I was only trying to help," Tink said. "Well, stop trying," Vidya yelled. Then she flew away. Tinkerbell flew to the beach to think. "At this rate, I should get to the mainland right about never," she grumbled. She flung a pebble into the bushes. Clink! What was that? She wondered. Beneath the leaves, Tinkerbell found a beautiful box full of metal parts. She immediately set it to work. Slowly the pieces came together. The parts made a music box with a ballerina on top. Tinkerbell's friends flew over and saw the music box. "Don't you even realize what you're doing?" Rosetta said. "You're tinkering." "Don't you like doing this?" Iridessa asked. "Yeah," Silvermist chimed in. "Who cares about going to the mainland anyway?" "I do," Tink replied. She looked at Rosetta. "Aren't you going to teach me how to be a garden fairy?" Rosetta looked at Tink. "Oh, I think this is your talent," she said. Tinkerbell felt as if her friends were giving up on her. She turned to the only fairy who might help her to get to the mainland. "Vidya, you're my last hope," she said. Vidya smiled. She told Tink that if she wanted to impress other fairies, she should capture the springlet thistles. So Tink and her mouse friend Cheese went off to trap the pesky plants. But when Tink wasn't looking, Vidya set the plant free. The sprinting thistles trampled through Springtime Square, ruining all the preparations for spring. Tinkerbell felt terrible. "I'm sorry," she told Queen Clarion. Then she flew off. She wanted to leave Pixie Hollow forever. Tinkerbell flew back to the workshop. She looked around at all the tools. She did like to tinker, but she wanted to visit the mainland even more. Then Tink saw some objects piled in a corner. She went over to look. They were the lost things she found on the beach. She thought Fairy Mary had thrown them away. Suddenly she had an idea. "That's it!" she cried. Meanwhile, Queen Clarion gathered the fairies together. She told them that there would be no spring that year. "Wait!" Tink cried, flying up. "I know how we can fix everything." She showed everyone the invention she had made using the lost things. The fairies could use them to redo the work that she had ruined. "Tinkerbell, are you sure you can do this?" the Queen asked. "Yes," Tink replied proudly, "because I'm a tinker." Tink told the fairies to bring her all the lost things they could find. Everyone set to work. They didn't have much time. Early the next morning, Queen Clarion arrived in Springtime Square. All the supplies were ready. "You did it, Tinkerbell. You saved spring," the Queen said. "We all did it," Tink said with a smile. Suddenly Fairy Mary flew over. She had found the music box Tink fixed. "You are quite a rare talent indeed," Fairy Mary said, "and I imagine there's someone out there who's missing this. Perhaps a certain tinker has a job to do after all, on the mainland." Tinkerbell couldn't believe it. Her dreams were coming true. The next day, fairies soared through the clouds and across the sea. When they reached the mainland, they fanned out in all directions. They melted the snow and filled the world with color. Tinkerbell had never seen such a magical sight. Finally, it was time for her to return the music box to its owner. Tink flew through the city with the box. When she reached the right house, the box began to glow. Tinkerbell placed the music box on a windowsill. Then she tapped the glass and hid. She watched as the little girl who lived there found the treasure she had lost. Tinkerbell had never been happier. When she got back to Pixie Hollow, she settled into the workshop and began to work on new inventions. From then on, Tink used her rare talent to help all the fairies with their work. She loved being a tinker after all.